Okay. Masterclass 3. Okay, we're going to go into some skills practice now. We're actually going to start practicing some skills. We're going to be looking at active listening skills, non-judgmental listening skills. We're going to do some practice of those skills as well, so you will get to practice them. Oh, happened to my slides there we go. We're going to have a deeper understanding of how we lead with empathy, and these are all the skills that we say are essential for your people managers. These are the soft skills. They are essential, that they're able to actively listen, be non-judgmental while they're listening, lead with empathy, and engage in compassionate leadership. So we're going to be tackling those before we have a little look at transactional analysis. Has anyone done TA before or understand TA? Been in a bit of TA? No? Okay, this will be new for everybody as well. TA, I think once you understand it, it'll be a little bit of a light bulb moment. It often is embedded into leadership development training courses. We look at it today because we think it's an essential leadership skill for all people managers as well. So let's jump in with active listening. So I'm going to run a little bit of a poll. Oh, and the poll is, how would you rate your active listening skills? So the poll should have just jumped up. How would you rate your active listening skills? Excellent, good, neutral, fair, or poor? How do you think you would rate your active listening skills? Okay, and Paul, I'll share. Let's get a little bit of an idea of who's in the room. So we've got nobody in excellent. 83% saying good, 17% someone's on the fence there, nobody in fair, and nobody in poor. Believe me that when we do this within our manager training, we actually get quite a lot of people in fair, and some people will be brave enough to even say they're absolutely terrible at it. Yeah, so it's definitely a skill that is much required by people managers. So I'm going to play a little bit of a video for you. Just make sure that the computer sound is on. What you're going to do is you're going to make a note of what Alex tells you about active listening. What I want you to make a note of is what are the 2 prerequisites for active listening, and then what are the 4 qualities of active listening. Then he's going to ask you a question at the end, and we're then going to pause the video and get some feedback. You're going to tell me what the 2 prerequisites are for active listening, the 4 qualities of active listening. And because nobody was an excellent, you're going to tell me what you need to improve on. So let's jump in with active listening.
We're going to talk about active listening skills. So let's get into the details. Hey there, I'm Alex Lyon, and I actually have a 1-hour course on effective listening skills for leaders. I will tell you more about that at the end of the video. So listening is so important because good listening is probably the easiest way to connect with other people and build relationships. Active listening is the opposite of passive listening, and you have probably experienced this. The person you're talking to might technically be hearing some of what you're saying, but they are tuned out. They're on autopilot. They're just not mentally engaged with what you're saying. And as the speaker, this can be very dissatisfying, very discouraging when people really aren't paying attention to us. Like, why am I even talking in the first place? But active listening looks, sounds, and feels obvious. Active listening means listening completely. But before anybody does that well, there are 2 secrets, 2 prerequisites to active listening. Number 1, you have to commit. You have to put aside whatever else might be distracting you and make listening a real priority. Good listening is first and foremost a choice that you make every time somebody speaks. Number two, it takes practice. Like any skill, you have to work at it. The good news is that listening is not mysterious or complicated. So let's talk about 4 qualities of active listening that you can put into practice. First, active listening involves nonverbal communication. And there are 2 sides to this. On the one hand, you're demonstrating that you're engaged in paying attention nonverbally. You put your devices completely away, you make eye contact, your body posture is open and oriented toward the other person. Now, on the other side, you're also noticing the speaker's nonverbal cues. There's an expression, you listen with your eyes. And part of that means you're noticing what's happening with the person visually on their mood or their emotion that they're showing. Do they look nervous, frustrated, annoyed? You can pick up on that by actively observing their nonverbal communication. Second, active listening involves verbal communication. Again, there are 2 sides to this. The most obvious part is asking good questions. Probably the most common pattern that good listeners demonstrate is that they ask a good question and then they let the speaker fully answer it. Like a good mental health therapist will ask thoughtful questions and then stop talking for a while and let the client speak. Honestly, what we're paying for in many cases is just somebody to listen carefully to us. So a good question is a huge part of the listening pie. And the other part of verbal communication is those small utterances that show the other person that we're following them, like, I hear you, yeah, that makes sense. Sometimes it's not even full words. It might just be, oh. Those little utterances keep us engaged and show the other person that we're following. Third, active listening involves responding to what somebody just said. So the pattern goes like this. You ask a question, they respond for however long that takes, and at the end of that talking term, you give an informed response to them. So let's say you just ask a person what they've been up to lately. That's your question. And in their talking turn, they tell you that they have been doing diving lately. So you actively listen for a while they're talking. At the end of their talking turn, it's your turn again. And this is where you show that you were actively following along and were interested in what they were saying. And you can do this by reflecting back what you just heard. You might say something like, wow, that sounds like an exciting sport. That's really cool that you're doing that. Or you could ask another follow-up question. I had no idea that you were into diving. How did you first get into that? Of course, you could do a little bit of both, like I just did. You could make an informed, reflective statement and then ask a follow-up question. The key is to respond to what they have just been saying. What you don't want to do is just look at them blankly and not react when they're done talking. And you've probably had somebody do this to you. You tell them about part of your day or something about your life, and they don't react. They just have this stone face. That's not active listening. If you want a gold star for active listening, then you have to respond to what they just said. Fourth, keep the focus on them and let them talk. Now, this one might seem obvious because you're listening, but when you decide to go into that listening mode, just make a decision that this is going to be all about the other person talking and not about you. Resist that temptation to jump in with your own story or to change the subject to your favorite topic. Keep your talking turns and questions concise and then stick to whatever topic they're interested in. Now, eventually, once they've done plenty of talking, there will usually be an opportunity later in the conversation for you to share your experiences. But my rule of thumb is to dedicate at least the first half of the conversation to pure active listening. So I hope these 4 tips help you listen completely in your next conversation. Question of the day, which one of these tips do you need the most work on?
Okay, so what were the 2 prerequisites for active listening? Come on in, Nick.
Commitment and practice.
Commitment and practice. Absolutely. Do you think that every time you listen, you make those 2 conscious decisions to make a
No,
commitment to someone?
no, but I feel I risk assess the conversation. So
Okay.
give you an example. If
Yes, please.
someone I know is wants to reach out about a mental health issue or something like that, that's an instant, right, 100% of my attention. If it's the
Okay.
wife coming home from work to tell me that her day hasn't been amazing, and I'm being honest, and the reason for that is when I used to actively listen, I also came up with solutions, and she didn't want that. She just needed me to listen. So I play my role so much better now by not actively listening, but actively pretending that I'm listening so that I don't come up with solutions so that she can get off her chest what she needs to, and I'm engaging at the right time, usually.
Okay. Okay. Well, thanks for being so honest and for highlighting the difference between what women and men want from conversations. Women usually want to be listened to and validated, and men often want to find solutions. And that's why we get into conflict. So, really good example there. Thanks for sharing that. We'll ask you again about whether you think you should actively listen to your wife a little bit differently after this. No, okay then. So, so commit and then practice. It's a skill. We've got to practice this. You know, actively listening to somebody is a difficult task. I mean, just listening to that video, how many of you were like, oh, yeah, oh, I've got to reply to that email when I'm finished. There's a distraction popping up on my phone. Even just watching a video, our attention is constantly being asked for somewhere else. So it's really difficult to do. So making that commitment means putting everything away and then also practicing it, making sure that you really hone and flex these skills. Come in, Alicia.
I was just going to say, I find it, listening is not a skill of mine when I'm doing something, like listening to a video, because my brain is like, but quite accurately describes my brain. But when there's somebody at the end of it, particularly somebody at the end of it that's got an issue, I think I personally find that much easier because it feels more important to listen to them than it does for me to listen to something else going on. But I think that the thing is that prerequisite is really important about the commit bit, because like Nick was just saying, you do have to recognize in yourself when you're not in a place. And so someone might come up to you and say, can I talk to you about something quite important? And I think it's really good to have that self-reflection to go, I know that I've got those 50 things in my head and I can't quiet them. And to say to them, would it be okay if we talked in half an hour's time? Because I've got some time and I want to speak to you then.
Yeah.
So I think part of that commitment is recognizing when you know you're not going to be committed and not trying to force yourself to be committed, but going, I'm not in a good place right now. If possible, like there are some circumstances where obviously it's really essential that it has to be at that moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, recognizing that, because that commitment thing, when I don't listen to myself, yeah, I know I'm not a particularly good listener, but I know when I can commit, then I would hope that I am.
And that commitment, it has to start there. If you don't make that commitment and get rid of all your distractions, then you're not going to be able to engage in your active listening skills. And it's about being able to really focus and have control over your brain. You know, one of the things that, I practice daily is having control over my brain when it starts to go, blah, 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 is to go recognize it and go, no, we're not doing that. We're not thinking about that. We need to focus on this. So that's another reason why we've got to practice. We've got to practice having control. Sorry?
I was going to say meditation is really good for that. It exercises that brain really, like that muscle very well.
Yeah, yeah. Just recognizing it, isn't it? And getting that back in 2 seconds. Somebody's just knocking on my door. 2 minutes.
Well, she's not very committed to our conversation, is she?
I don't know. I wasn't listening. Sorry, I was. Do you remember she's recording this?
Oh, yeah.
That'll be edited out.
Oh, there was a delivery. You just know that if they disappear, you never see it for weeks again. So, okay, lovely, brilliant. brilliant point there, Alicia. Emma, come on in.
I was just going to say, I know that I'm not brilliant at active listening. So I've created 2 ways that I have to practice that. So I'm a workplace coach. So I have to listen, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to help people to come up with solutions to whatever workplace problems they are experiencing. And as of tomorrow, I am starting mindfulness practitioner training. So I'll be a trained mindfulness practitioner. So I've put myself into 2 situations that make me feel incredibly uncomfortable, because I'm really bad at active listening. I want to talk. So I have to force myself to listen. And the only way I can do that is by practicing. So that's what I've done.
Yeah, great. I think you've already told us what you need to make an improvement on out of the 4 qualities. So let's jump into the 4 qualities. What is the first quality of active listening?
Non-verbal communication.
Yes, non-verbal communication, Stefan. What does that include?
Your body language, whether you're orientated towards that person, eye-to-eye contact, nodding in the right places, and just appearing to listen, not drifting off into the clouds.
Yeah, brilliant. So picked up all of the good points there. Rachel's got a hand up. Rachel, I've got a question for you. What do you think there could potentially be a challenge with that body language and eye contact for some people?
Someone who's neurodivergent, autistic, sometimes doesn't like eye contact. It makes them feel very uncomfortable. And that can be quite disconcerting for somebody who likes eye contact and that person isn't making eye contact with them, and they just assume that they're not focused or engaged in what they're saying when they actually are. That's all I can think of at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great. Nick, anything else from you?
Yeah, and depending on how you look, depends on whether you're intimidating to the individual that you've possibly been proactive and want to engage with to find out where they're coming from. Or you might resemble the issue that they've got. So they may have had a problem with a bald, middle-aged, slightly older than middle-aged man before. So for me to go up to them and engage with them might not be the best person. So it's to understand your resources, I guess, around you, to who can have that active engagement with the individual as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Some really good points there, especially around people who have certain neurodiversities that may find eye-to-eye contact quite difficult. And often men, usually if 2 men are facing direct eye-to-eye contact like that, it usually means there's about to be a fight. This is why when we talk about male-friendly ways of communicating, we look at shoulder to shoulder rather than face to face. And here's a little challenge. Next time you're in a room and you see lots of men in there and they're talking to each other, just recognize how they're probably talking side to side rather than actually directly face to face. So there are other ways to communicate with people, but those non-verbals, it's about actually showing that you're paying attention, isn't it? But also recognizing from an individual that maybe they are struggling with some eye contact and they may feel more comfortable depending on the way that you sat. So we've got some non-verbals there, the head nods. What was the next one?
Verbal communication.
Yeah, and what did that look like, Rachel?
Asking questions, letting the speaker answer, utterances, that show, just to show that you're following what they're saying.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. So we've got the verbals, we've got the non-verbals. We've also got the next part, which I think 1 and 2 is usually quite easy for people. I think people get that. They understand the non-verbals and the kind of verbal communication. But the next one, number 3, is a little bit harder for somebody. What is number 3? Come in, Laura.
So showing that you're engaged. So speaking back, if somebody's well, here's an example with somebody that's been diving and was telling you a story about diving. So responding back with something like, "Oh, that's really interesting. You like diving. Is that not dangerous?" Or some kind of question that gives the response that you are engaging with their conversation and you know what they're talking about.
Yeah, making an informed response, isn't it? Even if it's just reflecting back to them about what you heard, but then also adding on an additional question to that, a follow-up question to keep that conversation going, or to find out more details. So if somebody was talking to us about their mental health or well-being, we may need to ask questions to find out more information rather than it just being a bit of a conversation. And be able to reflect back, that sounds really difficult what you're going through at the moment. Have you been to the doctors for any support yet? So being able to ask those follow-up questions as well. And then the last one, what was the last one? Emma?
Focusing on them and letting them talk.
Yeah, don't jump in. And don't jump in, especially with your own story. Because what happens when we do that?
Takes the attention away from them, and it also is almost like belittling their story. It's like you've got two shelves instead of one.
Yeah, absolutely. It does, it takes the focus totally away from the other person and to you now. And if you're an empathic person, like all of us in this room, we probably then start to get concerned about the other person. And before you know it, we're having a conversation about your problem rather than the problem we were there to talk about in the first place. So absolutely keeping the focus on them and letting them talk. I think he comes up with a good 50-50 percentage on who should be talking and active at the time you're talking and active listening. I think that's great if it's just a general conversation, but if you are in a well-being conversation and as a manager, I would recommend it's 80-20. You should be listening 80% of the time and talking 20% of the time. So that's our active listening skills. We're going to keep them in mind because we're going to build on them now with our next slide.
I would love to read what you have.
We forgot about that. So the question was, what do you need to improve on the most? So out of all of those, how can you improve? What did you put down? Alicia?
That commitment.
Making the commitment, that first bit. Got to get that first bit right, Alicia. 100%. Anything else?
For me, sorry, I'll go.
Who was that?
Me.
Go on then.
Mine's keeping the focus on them, because sometimes I will say, well, I know this can help because it helped me or it helps someone else, and trying to give them that they're not alone in it. And I think the mindset of changing from I'm trying to help them to letting them help themselves, I find that quite difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be really challenging, can't it? And that's kind of what Nick was saying, that you're coming up with solutions for that individual rather than allowing them to find their own solutions by asking the right questions. And that is a big coaching skill, is being able to, not come in with your own story. And there's a way to do that. The way I do it, I will say something like, I can really relate to that. Tell me more about what's going on for you right now, so that they know you've got that connection, it's relatable, but without you then going into your story, but then asking the right questions to help them to find solutions. So what help do you think you might need?
Yeah.
And if you really want to help and show that you're helping, what can I do to help? What can I do to support you? Rather than you coming in with all the ideas, we want to empower them to find their own solutions. Yeah. Come on in, Laura. Sorry. Go on, Steph.
I was just going to say, I did that a little bit with a wellbeing chat with one of the girls in York the other day, where it's like, I understand. I kind of start the conversation with, this is my background. I'm trained in this, and this. got experiences, this, and this. You tell me your story, and let's see where we can help you. So I started it that way, and then let her do her bit, I think.
Okay, good. I mean, these are really great skills to use. So just honing them in and just getting a little bit, I think it's, yeah, a little bit practice, and also recognizing there's also a difference here. I think offering how it's worked for you is a really good way of mentoring somebody, especially if you're in like a position where you've done this before and this is how it worked for you. But in this kind of scenario, when it comes to mental health and well-being, it's such an individual journey. It's such an individual journey. So I'm a qualified recovery coach professional, so help other people recover from addictions. And one of the things that, obviously, I have lived experience of addiction and recovery as well, so I could spend all the whole hour of a recovery coaching session sharing my experience. But what I will tend to do, if I do have an experience that I think is particularly valuable, I'll ask them if it's okay for me to share it. Only because I think there's a reason behind that, not because I just want to share my story. There may be something that I think might be quite connecting and relatable for that individual. So there are other ways of kind of sharing information with other people as well. Thanks, Steph. Come in, Laura.
I didn't want to blow my own trumpet, but I should have put that I was excellent at listening, not necessarily all the time, but when I'm in a situation, because the training that I've had with our trauma support, you have to be one-to-one and you have to be very present and you have to actively listen. But I was just jumping in really to say that the Samaritans training that I've done as well, they've got something called the listening wheel, and that's quite helpful, and I'll share that with everybody if that's okay. Because it kind of gives you different ways of listening, and it's quite a good tool.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I haven't heard of that. Listening wheel, did you say?
Listening wheel, yeah.
How is it different to those basic active listening skills, Laura? Just out of
I don't think
interest.
it's different. I think it's everybody that learns differently, don't they? But
Yeah.
it's the kind of visualization I think is
Right.
quite helpful.
Excellent. Good stuff. Brilliant. Thanks so much.
That's okay.
Yeah, thanks for offering to share that. We've got loads of resources flying around today, haven't we? Anyone else want to share what they need to improve on? Nick, I've noticed you've disappeared. Are you still there?
I had a doorstep delivery.
Okay, that's
I
right.
guess for me, what I probably need to improve is my questioning skills.
Okay.
So I understand what they're saying, and I can emphasize, and I'm really good at not providing solutions unless it's the wife, because they just seem really simple options to me. But other people's problems are different, so I don't do that, and I do signpost to the right place. But to keep that conversation going and those questioning skills, I'm probably not brilliant at. I don't really do small talk. And I know it's not small talk, it's active listening based on what they've said, but they just don't come to me all the time.
Yeah.
Go, okay. Which doesn't really work.
Okay. So you struggle with asking questions, and here is about asking good questions, isn't it? It's like, why are we asking a question? What do we need to know? What do we need to find out? And there's a difference between having a well-being conversation or a mental health conversation like this, where we maybe need to know specific information, like what support have you had before? Is there anyone at home that can help you? Do you have the information for the EAP? There's very specific questions that we can ask. But generally, when it comes to active listening skills, it really helps us to build rapport. That's what it's ultimately about. It's relationship building. It really helps us to get to know people, to understand people. It helps us to understand the way that they think about things, how they perceive their world around them. And we can only really do that by getting curious. So maybe there's something there about honing in and practicing your curiosity a little bit, Nick, to start to think about some questions that you can ask.
Thank you.
Good one. Thanks for sharing that, Nick. Come in, Alicia.
I was just going to say, sometimes I don't think it's about necessarily having questions. So when you do that reflection piece where you say to someone, I can hear you're feeling sad, that actually is enough to keep them talking. They'll either take confirmation and be like, yeah, I am feeling sad, and then they'll carry on, or they'll go, no, I'm not feeling sad, I'm feeling angry. And then so I think sometimes you don't necessarily have to ask a question, but it's just about reflecting what they've seen, and when in hearing it back, they reprocess it, and then they're able to move on with themselves. The other thing I was going to say is the restorative practice. I can't see it because of my blur. The restorative practice stuff I've done, they have a restorative way of asking questions that's really quite nice. So they do what's happened, what were you thinking or feeling at the time, what do you think about it now, who's been affected and how's it affected you, and then what do you need to make things right, and how can I support you to do that. And I think that's quite a nice just guide in the back of your head sometimes when you're like, oh, I'm a bit stuck. You think, okay, I haven't asked them about their feelings, and people really struggle to talk about their feelings, so sometimes you might have to kind of go, yeah, but how are you feeling? But yeah, anyway, that was just
and it's such a deep thing. We will look at reflective practice and how we can use specific questioning for reflective practice as well, which is quite similar to that model that you just shared there, Alicia. But even, asking people about their feelings, like how did that feel, is really challenging for people to answer. Really difficult. And I'm not being kind of sexist here, but we found through the research that we did for our ambassador program that it's often much harder for men to articulate their emotions and feelings out verbally as well. So even that can be like a really difficult question to ask, it's like, what is that emotion that you're feeling? How did that make you feel? When we do work with Ryan Park, you'll get to hear him talking about engaging men. One of the questions that he asks men, instead of feeling, how are you feeling? What's on your mind? It's usually a better question for men rather than how are you feeling, kind of what's on your mind. So there's other ways to communicate with people as well.
Have to say.
Okay, thanks for that, Alex. Done with you. So we're going to move on to, okay, now we're listening. We know how we're listening. Non-judgmental listening. So we've got another little poll for you. I'll just stop sharing that one and go back. Non-judgmental listening skills. So how would you rate your non-judgmental listening skills? Again, excellent, good, neutral, fair, or poor. Oh, okay. Let's have a little look. So again, we've got somebody in neutral, sat on the fence with that. 67% saying good, 17% saying excellent. Now, this is a one that definitely needs a lot of practice because we love being judgy, don't we? Anybody watch Married at First Sight? Love Island? We're judging people the minute they're walking down that aisle, and we're making all these judgments about them, and then it's all over Facebook about these judgments. And humans do it so well. And there is a reason for that. We've got to understand who is friend and who is foe, who is in our team and who is not. So it's a very natural response that we have. But it can be very unhelpful if it comes across as we can't often stop those judgments, but I think being able to reflect that you've had that judgment and be able to say, why am I judging that? So come on in, Nick.
Yeah, so believe it or not, in fact, I mentioned it day one, didn't I? Having spent 10 years in the classroom with teenage kids, and my mum swore blind I'd never last 2 weeks as a teacher. But to last the 10 years that I did in the classroom, I think I'm really good at understanding my biases and putting them behind me. Because we all have biases, we've all got lived experiences. We know who we are and why we have our opinions, whether that be political or whatever they are, we've got them. But I do find that when I'm in a situation of supporting someone, that who I am isn't there. It never was in the classroom. It never is when I'm having a mental health conversation. It never is when I'm out supporting people. It's about what's in front of me. So I did put excellent because I think you would have to really, really go a long way to find fault in me where that bias or opinionated piece comes out, because it's crystal clear that they need support, regardless of who they are, where they come from, and what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? And thanks for sharing where you selected yourself on that as well, and just sharing a little bit about your experiences from the classroom and how it's really helped you to realize that people's behaviors and what's going on, there's usually a story behind that. And the again, back to recovery coaching, there's a saying in recovery coaching which is deal with your own shit. Which is exactly what judgments are. That's your own stuff. That's not about that person. That's your own stuff that's connecting that judgment, and it usually comes from the ego. But that's not to judge ourselves. Doesn't mean we're a bad person if we're making judgments about people, because some of this can come from the way we've been brought up, our own trauma, how we've experienced our own world. So we also have to make sure that we're not judging ourselves. And, being non-judgmental means it's got to start with ourselves as well. So let's have a little look into non-judgmental listening. Oh, sticky button. Go on. So I'm going to put you into two groups. This is just a short activity. I want you just to be writing down words, emotions, feelings, things, behaviors, whatever comes to mind. One breakout room is going to be, how does it feel to be judged negatively? So if somebody did judge us negatively about something that we shared with them, so think about a time where you may have shared something about yourself where you felt judged. How did it feel? How did it make you feel? And then the other team are going to be doing, how does it feel not to be judged? So I'm just going to recreate those rooms. And I'm telling you, it's literally 5 minutes. If you think those 20-minute ones have flown over quickly, these 5 minutes are going to fly over. So team one, we've got Alicia, Nick, and Rachel. Team two is everybody else. So room one, you're doing, how does it feel to be judged negatively? And then room two, you're doing, how does it feel not to be judged negatively? Okay, everybody clear on what they're doing? Yeah, okay. See you in 5 minutes. Quick fire round. Okay, 5 minutes flown over. So team one, how does it feel to be judged negatively? Who's going to give some feedback?
We were team one, weren't we? I get so fixated on team one and team two that my brain zeroes out. We talked about how it can knock your confidence. There's a real feeling of like injustice or unfairness. It can cause somebody to sort of spiral about overthinking what's been said and worrying about other judgments. Be really defensive. We talked about how it can really damage relationships, create a massive void that's quite difficult to come back from. The lack of trust makes you feel really defined by one thing that you know that's probably not in your control, and again it makes you feel like you haven't got control over something. So rubbish is how we I think that was about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Some really good emotions and feelings and negative reactions there. And then ultimately it just shuts people down, doesn't it? If you feel judged, you're not going to share anything about yourself beyond there. Because like you say, the trust's gone, the psychological safety is no longer there. Why would I share anything more about you when you're making us feel like that? Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff. And on the opposite side, how does it feel not to be judged? Who's going to give feedback from team two?
We can probably do it between us in case we forgot stuff. But we found this hard, didn't we?
Yeah. Why?
Because we said that really, no matter what happens, you're always being judged by somebody. So it was quite difficult to put ourselves in a space where we weren't being judged. So we sort of had to look at it like in a scenario base from experience, I think. So I scribbled some stuff down. I don't know if anybody else did, but things around psychological safety and feeling understood and having no fear and authenticity. And then I know there were definitely others that other people said. So I'll let them say it.
Okay.
We got trusted and valued, empowered, supported, free to share yourself, less stressed, more relaxed, relieved. We talked about problem shared is problem halved. You're more likely to share problems.
Yeah. Anything from you, Laura?
Oh, I think we covered everything.
Okay.
Yeah, I think like as everybody was saying, it's that kind of underlying feeling that even if you do feel relieved to get everything out and you feel like you haven't been judged, you still go away and think, oh crikey, I hope they don't share that. And you know, so there's still that underlying fear, even if you do let go, unless it's like a counselling situation or a situation where you know they're not going to speak about it again.
Okay. Is that a confidentiality thing rather than a judgment? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's true.
Yeah. 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 Okay. I mean, the only way that I can explain sharing something that would be seen as quite judgmental and not being judged is that somebody truly sees you, is that you are truly seen, you are seen by somebody, and that is all of those things that you shared around empowering. It makes us want to open up. It makes us want to share more. So I'm going through therapy at the moment. It took us 47 years to get into therapy, deal with my problem that I keep pushing away. And being in that therapy setting is being seen. Because there's no judgment in there. There's only reflection. There's time to think. There's time to talk it through. There's time to figure it out. And it's truly being seen by somebody else. And that therefore creates a safe space where somebody is able to hold that space for you. It's somebody holding space for you to be seen without judgment, with empathy and compassion and understanding. And that's a very magical space to be in. but we can create those spaces. You don't have to be in therapy to create those spaces. And we can do that by active listening and then being non-judgmental while we are listening. Because unfortunately, once we start to make judgments about people, that comes through in how we behave towards them. Yeah. So if we're making judgments about people's behaviors, the way they think, the way they feel, even their political leanings, there's one of the biggest judgments that people make because of a political party that you voted for, that you will be judged on that. So we do it. We it's very difficult for us not to do, but we can create these spaces for people to feel as if they're not judged, and therefore we will not behave in a negative way towards them. That unfortunately then leads to stigma and discrimination. And then that's when we get problems with the Equality Act and people feel like they're being discriminated against, and that can be really traumatic for people. So we can see there the benefits of being non-judgmental. It helps us to fully understand the speaker. Remember, when we're making judgments from our own ego, our own perspectives, our own mindset, our own experiences, rather than fully understanding the person that's before us and what they're sharing with us. It helps to create that safety, and it fosters that honest and open conversation. It allows that to happen. It creates that psychological safety space for them. And it helps to encourage people to find their own solutions. Because actually, when we're coming in with those fixes, and Nick, you're not going to like this, when you're coming in with the solutions, you're making a judgment on the problem and coming up with the solution based on that. So you're actually judging that problem to start off with.
And as I said at the beginning of this, I risk assess my conversations.
Yeah.
So if it's someone that needs support, great. If it's someone that's just going to tell me the same again tomorrow night and then the next night, at some point they have to listen to the solution.
Yeah. Or maybe
listen. I agreed. I've tried both of them.
No, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying. My husband's exactly the same. He's talked about moving jobs for years and years and years and years and never got round to doing it. And it's people get stuck, don't they? They get stuck. And I think there's, oh God, then you're going into like motivational interviewing skills to help people to get unstuck from those things. So I get it when you're in a relationship as well and you're hearing the same thing over and over again. However, as a manager, you may also be in that position where somebody is struggling with their mental health problem, struggling with an addiction problem, and not getting help. They're not taking action on it because they're stuck or they're not ready. It's not the right time. They haven't hit the rock bottom yet. So even as a manager may also be in that position where they're like, but this is where we have to help people to find their own solutions and then be accountable to them. Because it's great that we can offer supportive measures, reasonable adjustments. We can do all of this, but what are you going to do to find a solution to this problem as well? So it also helps that person to work through the situation, and it helps us to understand our own position more quickly. You know, why are we making those judgments? What is it deep inside of us that is making that judgment? And I make judgments all the time, but I also then question myself about where does that come from? Where is that coming from? And sometimes it's deeply rooted in being a 6-year-old. This isn't easy stuff for people just to be less judgmental. There's a depth to it, but it gets us thinking about it. And then what leads on from that is then how are we experiencing or showing empathy and understanding? Because this really is the key to emotional support. So if you're thinking about it again from your people manager experience, great, we've got them listening actively. Great, we've got them asking some good questions. great, we've got them being non-judgmental, but then how do they actually express that? How do we help them to show understanding and empathy as this key to emotional support? So I've got a little video. You don't need to do anything other than watch it. It's literally 60 seconds.
What if your card offered you benefits like a Financial Times?
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
I love that video from Brené Brown. Brené Brown does some amazing work. If you haven't heard of her already, she's got a brilliant book called Dare to Lead. This is all about leaders and being authentic and leading with bravery, being brave in these conversations with people, because that authentic leadership, it doesn't have an ego, and it comes from connection. And ultimately, that's what we want. We want our people managers to be able to connect with the team and do it in a non-judgmental way, where they're able to actively listen, to experience empathy. And a lot of people don't understand what empathy is. A lot of people think that empathy is compassion, and the two completely different things. So helping people to understand what empathy is, it's about being in that space, sitting in that emotional space. The problem is with empathy is if you are doing this too much all of the time and you're not getting the right support, what we end up with is people who experience compassion fatigue and we burn out. So this is another really important reason when we've got roles like HR who would do a lot of this people stuff, a lot of putting ourselves in this position where we're feeling empathy, we're feeling compassion for people. It's all given out and we're not given anything back again. And then we end up with burnout and compassion fatigue. So anyone in supportive roles, it's so important that you're able to make sure that they are being supported as well. Okay, which gives us a nice little segue into, well, how do we actually show it? What the hell's just gone on there? Oh, Sorry, just decided to close everything down. Where's it gone? Oh my God, it's actually shut the whole presentation down. Give me 2 seconds.
Just while you're finding it, Emily,
Yes?
I need to go because I've got a doctor's appointment.
Okay.
So if I'm back in time, I'll jump back on. And if I'm not, I'll catch up and I'll see you next week.
Wonderful. Great stuff. Thanks, Emma. Bye. I don't know what's happened to PowerPoint, but it's just decided to totally crash. Okay, let's get this back up and running. I think I need to go and buy myself a new computer, to be fair, as well. I think this one's just about had it. I just don't want to go through the trauma. I don't want to go through the trauma of having to get a new computer and set everything up and oh God, all of that stuff. Okay, here we go. Right, let's get out of there and then go back in again. Oh God. Here we go. So this is how we can show understanding and empathy. And you'll find that it's linking into everything that we've covered already. We've got to be present. We've got to make the commitment to give our full attention and remove any distractions. We cannot have empathy and understanding with people if we're not fully connected to that person. If it's unclear, ask for clarity. Yeah. So we can only truly be empathic with that individual if we truly understand what they mean. And if we don't, we ask for clarification. Yeah. We want to get it right. This could be a good question to ask. What I'm hearing you say is that right? It feels like you feel really angry about that. Am I picking that up right? You know, we can get clarity about it. Make sure we really understand what it is that they're saying. Acknowledge those feelings. You know, be in that space, feel what they're feeling. Like that sounds like you're going through a really tough time. I can see why you'd feel that way. That sounds really heartbreaking that you're going through that at the moment. This is reflecting those feelings back to that person, avoiding that judgment. We've got to listen without jumping to conclusions or offering solutions, because that's us making judgments straight away. We're jumping to conclusions and we're making a judgment on what that solution might be. And that solution for that individual has to be up to them. They've got to figure that out for themselves. In recovery coaching, one of the things that we never want to do with somebody's recovery is kind of trying to think of the words. I can't think of the words, but I'm thinking of a picture and a journey instead. Recovery from mental health, from trauma, from addiction, it is a journey. And it's a journey that everybody has to go through at different stages, learn the different profound meanings of that journey, find the things that work for us in that journey to help us to recover. We don't want to short fuse it. Because if you think about it, you know, the whole point in me going on a journey from, I don't know, from here up to Scotland means I get to see all the beautiful scenery on the way. I need to stop at this beautiful services where they do these lovely pies that I like. Yeah, I get the excitement of going on this journey and getting to the end point. If I just went and pressed a button from here to Scotland and I'm there already, I'd miss all of those things. So when people are on a recovery journey, whether it's mental health or addiction or anything, any kind of journey that somebody's on, we don't want to short fuse it. We want them to experience their journey. And then offering support, so just asking, how can I best support you right now? Rather than coming up with the solutions. How best can I support you right now? And allow them to tell us. So that's how we can show empathy and understanding. But then this links into compassionate leadership. So compassion is completely different to empathy, but we've got to experience empathy first. So if you're all walking down the street and there is a homeless person 100 yards from the road from you, what needs to happen for you to experience empathy to start off with for that person?
For me,
Alicia, yeah?
very little. I just need to see them.
You just need to what, sorry?
I just need to see them.
See them. So you've got to notice them. You've got to know that they're there. Yeah. So we can only show empathy and compassion if we notice them, which means we've got to be in that space with them. We've got to be able to see what's going on. So then you notice them. What needs to happen next for you to show compassion towards that person? Nick?
Yeah, you've got to engage with them.
Okay.
'Cause
So we need to
one thing,
engage.
yeah, one thing is seeing them, but the next thing is to make some form of connection, whether it's the acknowledgement, whether it's a whatever it is, it's that engagement piece for me.
Okay, so we need to engage in a certain way with them. There's something else needs to happen for compassion to be engaged with.
I think for me, it's to understand why they're in that situation.
Okay, so
Or help them.
understanding. So that's the empathy side, having empathy and understanding around how they've ended up in that situation. But do you need to know that to show compassion?
No, if they're homeless, the reason why they are homeless or on the street, it could be massive amounts and may take months to find out. The fact that they are there, the fact that they're probably not in a situation that they want to be in. They're in a situation that they found themselves in, and you're in a different one, and you have the ability to maybe change the way they're feeling for 5 minutes or a short time. Um, you can do that regardless of how they've got to where they are and how you got to where you are with them.
So you said it just in that sentence. How am I helping that other person to feel better about the situation that they're in? So compassion is an overwhelming feeling of wanting to take action to help somebody who is in a difficult situation to improve it. That's what compassion is. Compassion in itself is actually really, really complicated and complex. There's so many elements that you need to think about in terms of compassion, especially around not being non-judgmental, distress tolerance, being able to tolerate somebody else's level of distress. We cannot help somebody else compassionately if we're stressed and feeling emotional about this person's distress, because now we're both distressed. Now, no, we can't help anyone. So compassion becomes really kind of deep in itself. Yet we see this word and we think it's a very easy, simple thing to do. So when we talk about compassionate leadership, there is this cognitive component. That's the understand. So that's what you said there. Understand, Steph. I understand how you got to that situation. And we can only do that through asking good questions, active listening, having empathy, really feeling what it must have been like to experience what that person was experiencing. That's your effective empathic component. Once we get to that, we feel it. We feel what that must be like. We feel the horror or the terror or the anxiety or the uncomfortableness of what it must have felt for that individual or what they're feeling. They're sat there, they're cold, they haven't eaten, they've got nowhere to sleep, their health looks really poor. We emotionally feel that, connect to that. And then the compassion is the drive or motivational components, right? I want to help you. What do I need to do? So moving from empathy into compassion, we can't get there without starting with the active listening. These all link into this process that we've got to follow if we want to get to a point where we're leading with compassion. So compassion and empathy in terms of business terms. They help us to communicate better. They help us to build good relationships. They're not common traits in the workplace. You know, think about your managers, your people. You know, how compassionate do you think they are on a day-to-day basis? Because it's much easier to walk past that homeless person, right? It's much easier to notice them and then just walk past.
So, for some, it isn't, because it then weighs heavy on your moral compass, the fact that you didn't stop and engage, or at least acknowledge them or say good morning. I mean, you don't have to always give them money or anything like that. Sometimes they just want to be seen and morning and spoken to. And if you don't, then are you going to kick yourself for not doing it later on during the day?
Well,
So
it completely depends, doesn't it? It depends on whether they've noticed that person. You might not have even noticed them and walked past them. You might have had your phone, been on your phone and not even noticed them.
that's a different action then, isn't it? Noticing and then choosing to ignore or not engage is different to acknowledging it and your moral compass going, actually, this is the right thing.
And yeah, and then there's the acknowledging them, saying good morning, great, but then that's not compassion. Compassion is the action of helping that person. So you, even by acknowledging them, you're not actually showing them compassion.
Yeah, I would argue differently,
Okay.
because sometimes you get this wonderful big smiley face and they're buzzing because someone's actually stopped and said, morning, how you doing? You good? Have a good one. Uh, they've been seen. So yeah, I don't think it's all about always a physical thing or something of peace. It can be verbal that improves someone's situation.
Okay. Okay, dog. Okay. Well, I'll have a little think about that. You have a little think about it as well. We'll have a little think about that, but because I think we're on different levels of a response of what that response is, I think. Coming in, Laura. Laura might shed some light on it for us.
I don't know about that one. But I've got two things. The first one, I kind of heard alarm bells when we were talking about I feel what you feel, and I understand what you're going through. So we're taught to never say I know what you're going through, or we should always just say I can't imagine what that feels like, because you'll never walk a day in somebody else's shoes. So
Yeah.
it sounded like we should be saying I feel what you feel. So that was why I wanted to bring that up. And the second thing was around, you asked what it was like in the workplace. So for us, we do so much safeguarding training, and the specific example about homeless people, we're taught what to do, how to look out for people that are vulnerable,
Yeah.
and then what to do. So we refer to Street Link, and we have a plan. So you don't have that feeling of guilt but it's almost training people to know what to do, so that they, when they feel that compassion, they can act on it.
Okay, great. So there's two things in there. The first thing was absolutely, you will never know what it feels like to be that individual and go through that journey, because they're all very unique, but we can feel the emotions that they might be expressing. Yeah. So we can understand what they're going through. But yeah, absolutely. We can feel the feelings that they must be feeling if they're sharing those. Yeah, obviously we're picking up on people's emotion. But yeah, you're right. You would never say, you know, I know what you're going through, because you absolutely don't, and everything would be completely different. So yeah, you're absolutely right there, just for clarity. And then with the second part, absolutely, safeguarding in the workplace is all about recognizing where somebody's at risk of significant harm to themselves or others, and then taking action to prevent that harm. So it's a little bit different than compassion, because there's a risk there. So you're preventing harm from happening, or preventing harm from continuing to happen with safeguarding. Rather than compassion, for me, would be so safeguarding would be, I need to tell somebody, whether you're happy with me to tell somebody or not. I need to breach confidentiality to keep you or somebody else safe. Compassion would be, I can see that you're really struggling here. So let's use the homeless person. So we've acknowledged them. Hiya, how you doing today? You know, how's things for you today? Have you got somewhere to sleep tonight? What can I do to help you today? And it may be, can you buy you some food? I've got nowhere to stay. Can I have some money? And has shown compassion in a different way, rather than safeguarding would be a legal obligation to prevent harm to somebody. So again, the two different things there, I think. What are your thoughts, Laura? Can you see, are you seeing them as two different things?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I just think I've got into problem solving mode.
Have you? Have you?
So with everybody struggling, like, because I see homeless people an awful lot on my traveling up and down on the network, and I carry coffee vouchers, and often a homeless person will sit and talk to me, and I'm saying, you know, what's going on? How are things? And I'm comfortable having that conversation because I'm dealing with it all the time, and it used to be my role. And you know, I'll often give them a coffee voucher, or you know, give some kind of signposting or whatever. But I think the majority of people are frightened to actually engage or have that conversation. So I think that's where we're struggling because of the actual situation analysis.
Yeah, but well, and that's it though. This is the thing as well with your people managers, aren't there? One of the things that we said about what one of the barriers to your workplace having all the Sams and Joes in there was time.
Yeah.
How many people are walking past homeless people going, I don't have time to stop. I don't even have time to stop and notice this person right now. I'm going to be late myself. I've got my own shit to deal with. So yeah, it's, you know, we talk about compassionate leadership often like it's a thing that we've got to get in there. Again, it's another box to tick. We've got to get compassionate leadership in there, but it's really deep and it can be really, really difficult for people to engage in, especially when we've got all of these barriers in the way that may be preventing us from even noticing that somebody's struggling in the first place. Anyone have any questions before we move on? Because it's not common, but you know, I'm not going to talk about these because we're kind of running a little bit behind and I want to catch up after the break. But you know, this is what happens when empathy and compassion are missing from those workplace cultures. People don't feel psychologically safe. They don't feel like they belong. They don't feel like they've been recognized. They don't feel like people have got time for them. They're not having conversations around their mental health and well-being. And then you've got managers like yours, Nick, saying, I ain't got time for none of that stuff. I'm here to do admin rather than to actually get involved in these types of conversations. Because what we're asking these managers to do, especially without training, is to understand all of this. Go away and have these conversations about people's well-being without any training around this, without any knowledge of skills and understanding what we're actually asking them to do, and then how to respond to it. So, you know, these are just things that to think about in terms of, you know, how do we embed them into your workplace behaviors? We are going to do a skills practice. What time is it now? What time did we come back? Was it 10 past? 10 past, an hour and a half. We're going to have a little break. Then when we come back, we're going to do a little bit of skills practice just so you can practice those skills. And we'll recap them before you come back. So it's 22 now, 23. Come back at 15 minutes, 5 to 5 to 3, and then we'll be here for the last hour and a half of the session. Everybody okay with what we're doing? 15-minute break. Okie doke. I'll see you back here in 15 minutes. So welcome back, everybody. We're now going to move into transactional analysis. So So we've just gone through our skills, our active listening, non-judgmental listening, looking at how that leads into empathy and understanding, and then finally compassionate leadership. You did a little bit of a skills practice there just to help you to bring all of those skills together, but really showed how in the space of 7 minutes each, you were building that rapport, building that connection, getting a little bit deeper with people and building that psychological safety and trust. Transactional analysis takes us back to the 70s, and this is where Eric Berne, who was a psychotherapist, developed his 3 ego states called transactional analysis. What TA is all about is about how we transact with each other, and at the basics of it, how we communicate. So what Eric Berne found is that when we were communicating with each other, we were communicating from a specific ego state. And these ego states will all determine whether we can communicate well together or there was conflict in the way that we were communicating. When we understand TA, it really helps us to communicate better with our colleagues. It really helps us to manage conflict or prevent conflict from happening. And you may have heard of parent-child culture within workplaces. And this is where that parent-child culture comes from, the ego states of TA. So the first ego state is the parent ego state. This is where you have your parent ego state, which is copied from our parents in childhood, and that is either controlling or nurturing. So there's 2 sides to the parent ego state. It can be the controlling parent or the nurturing parent. We then have the adult ego state. This is where we respond to the here and now. This is all about problem solving and in the moment. We then have our child ego state, and this is often replayed from our own childhoods. And we've preserved it as we've developed into adulthood. And this is the 2 sides to the child ego state, the adapted compliant or the rebellious free. Now, none of these ego states are bad. We're not judging them. They are what they are. And sometimes the certain ego states are right for the situation that we're in, as we will discover. But for the most part, when it comes to workplaces, there are some really big benefits for workplaces to foster a culture of an adult to adult ego state, moving away from that parent and child ego state. So TA can help managers to understand why communication is breaking down, but not just between colleagues, between themselves and their team members as well. We often see that communication breaks down, it causes conflict, and as a manager, it can help us to recognize where that conflict is coming from ourselves and other people. It can also help us to recognize and shift these unhelpful dynamics. So we're going to look at an example of a manager as a critical parent versus an employee as a rebellious child. As you can imagine, it's going to get a little bit messy. It can also help us to improve leadership. It helps us to deal with conflict resolution and can support us in our coaching skills, just by making sure that we're constantly trying to come back to, let's get into that adult to adult mode where we can communicate in the here and now and be problem solving and solution focused. It can also help us to foster healthier relationships by encouraging that adult to adult communication. This is where there is a lack of ego. It's all just about collaboration. It's about solving the problem that's in front of us rather than coming at it from an emotional, egotistical way of being. So we start off with TA, understanding complementary transactions. This is when the ego states match. So if our ego states are matching with the person that we're communicating with, we can communicate for a very long time without any conflict around there. The conflict will happen once the ego states begin to change. So we can see here, the employee says, I'm finding this difficult. So it's in the moment, I'm sharing that there's a problem in the adult ego state. The manager responds, okay, let's talk about it. So that's in the moment, problem solving. You can imagine two rebellious children. Two rebellious child ego states get together. Maybe you've got a particular friend that that it's going to get a little bit naughty, you're going to get into trouble, you're going to be an hour late home after you said you were going to be home at 9 o'clock. And because you have so much fun in your rebellious child ego states. We then have crossed transactions, and this is when the ego states, they don't match. So we can see the example here. The employee saying, I'm finding this difficult again, adult looking for a solution. And the manager replies, well, we need to reach these targets. This is a critical parent ego state. Now, if this was me, my main child ego state is the rebellious child. This would push me into the rebellious child. I would probably tell that manager where to go about the targets. I'm struggling, and you're just coming to tell me about my targets. I'm going to rebel against that. If I was a compliant child, then I might just put my head down and go, okay, I'll get these I'll just get it done, which means we're not finding a solution to that problem at all. These kind of dynamics going to escalate. So here we go again. Why is this report late again? You're never on time. There's the critical parent coming out. That pushes that rebellious child into, well, maybe if I wasn't overloaded, I could actually do my job. So we start to get this conflict happening. So we can see here that transactional analysis in the adult to adult mode would really help us to deal with a challenge like this. So we can see here is instead of responding as a critical parent, we can respond in the adult to adult mode. I noticed the report wasn't in on time. That is in the moment and it's a problem. Is there anything getting in the way? This is solution focused, adult mode. And then the employee is going to respond, yes, I've been managing higher workload than usual. Can we review my priorities? In the moment, problem solving, we're communicating, we're collaborating, and we can do this really well in this adult to adult mode. So in the groups, we're just waiting for everybody to come back. When the groups come back, we're going to find out a little bit about how they've assessed how each ego state transaction from the manager would impact their colleagues. So they're going to be looking at, if I was a manager communicating with my colleagues in the critical parent or the nurturing parent, how would it impact their motivation, productivity, accountability, and trust? They're also going to be looking at if I was communicating as a rebellious child often, how is that going to impact colleagues' motivation, productivity, accountability, and trust? They're also going to be looking at the adult to adult ego state as well, to see how or which ego state is going to be the gold standard one for culture, for well-being, for tackling any communication issues, and for managing conflict, but also for helping people to be motivated at work, be productive, be accountable for their own actions, and build that trust and psychological safety. Welcome back. Where's Nick?
He was there.
Taking the scenic route.
He is. So funny. Okay, let's go with team one, who's going to give feedback on, it was Laura, Nick, and Rachel, on the parent ego states first.
So I openly admitted I'm a critical parent. I
Okay.
see the value in critical parenting. And although I'm happy to champion that, I think the general consensus from all three of us was know your audience. So it doesn't matter which ones of those states that you're in, as long as you appreciate who you're engaging with and how you're engaging. I referred back to when I was a teacher. I was very much a critical parent in the classroom, but I was consistent with everybody, and everyone knew that's how I was, and my relationships with the kids were amazing. As we've moved in different careers and different roles and different jobs, when I'm speaking with my graduates who are telling me they're not going to get their deliverables done by the end of the week because they need to leave early because they're going out on Friday night, you have to step into the role of a critical parent and go, I'm sorry, do you want to turn up on Monday for a job? Because you knew the commitment you signed up to. In a real world, we'd all like to be adults, but we're human. And sometimes that human piece dictates who we are. And I think as long as you're consistent, but know your audience and how they engage with you, so it's about listening. I think we're in a good place.
Okay. Interesting take on it, being a critical parent, especially as a rebellious child. Having a rebellious child ego state, the last thing that rebellious children want is critical parents.
Probably, but that's why my daughter isn't a rebellious child. I was.
Did you find that there could be other ways of communicating? So I'll tell you what, let's go through. So how did you talk about how would a critical parent ego state impact your team's motivation, productivity,
So
accountability, and
yeah,
trust?
so we didn't really break these down into
Okay.
characteristics that were there. We kind of just talked about the general characteristics of the roles. So totally appreciate the nurturing parent and the value that adds in some situations. But again, that Rachel used the fact that she was primary school teaching, they were young children, they need that nurturing to support them where they are. You try and be an adult with those sometimes, and they don't want to engage with you. That's it's just not what's going to happen. Um, and sometimes being a critical parent, defining exactly what has to happen, when it has to happen, and why it hasn't happened, motivates people because that applies that extra bit of pressure to the situation. So, but yeah, in the grand scheme of things, speaking calmly, rationally, and in as an adult would, it works best for all of us.
Yeah. So yeah, it's an adult state is about being in the moment and problem solving, isn't it? And I think if you'd gone through this process here a little bit, we would have had a deeper understanding of how that would impact people within your team. So the motivation levels of, so first of all, let's go to the nurturing side. You know, if you've got your main parent ego state as a nurturer, that also isn't great for your team because then you're taking on people's tasks all the time. Oh, here, let me do it. Let me help you. I can do that for you. A bit like I always use this example. We'll use a child example, just as you've used child example there. A child learning to tie its shoes. If I am a critical parent, I'm going to say, you need to just do it this way. This is where you do it. Just tie your shoelaces this way. Just do it as I'm telling you. And every time you get it wrong, I'm going to be critical. No, that's not the way you do it. You need to do it this way. Do it like I'm doing. Versus a nurturing parent, let me do it. I'll tie your laces for you. Let me tie them laces for you. How are both of those sides going to impact that child?
Ends up with shoelaces that are done up, don't they?
But is it we all probably tie our shoelaces very differently, and aren't we all about inclusivity and neurodiversity, and we all think and do things differently?
And I guess that's why both of those approaches could work, because some people do need that extra support to get those laces tied, whereas other people, it's very much about just watch it once and crack on.
So, and the extra support would be, let's help you to start tying your shoelaces. What do we need to do? How do you naturally hold those laces? Let's see if you can do them. I'll show you how I do mine. See if it's okay for you to do it that way. Maybe you're doing it a different way. There's all these other different ways of tying your shoelaces. So that adult to adult will get the shoelaces tied, but with that person being empowered, giving them motivation, they're productive, they're going to get to it, they're going to be accountable because they're doing it themselves, and they're going to trust you to allow them to do it the way that's going to be best for them. Who'd have thought tying shoelaces would cause so much bloody trouble? Alicia, come on in, your hand went up. Any thoughts on this?
A couple of things. One, firstly, I agree the shoelaces get done up, but they get done up whilst you're stood over them, either doing it for them or telling them they have to do them up. The second you step away, they can't do it with their shoelaces, and therefore you give yourself an issue going. Whereas adult to adult, you go through that process, they learn. It's like, teach a man to fish or give them whatever that phrase is, the other way around.
Yes.
And this really relates to, I'm obsessed with relational and restorative practice. There's something they're teaching there about the social discipline window, which is a graph where you have 4 states and you have high challenge and high support. And you ideally want to live most of your life as a manager in high challenge and high support. So where you're challenging someone, but you're supporting them. But there are times when you need the others. So there may be times when you need really high level of support. You need to be that nurturing parent because someone's really struggling and they aren't able to do it by themselves and something's going on short term. Or you need to be that critical parent and where, maybe there's deadlines to be done and it has to be done and you haven't got time to sort of you need to be directive and you need to say, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do that. I think the point is like you want to live the main bulk of your time in that adult to adult conversation because that's where everyone long term really thrives. But that's not to say that there aren't places sometimes in certain situations where you need to come in with the other aspects. But the social discipline window I love, and I think it follows similar.
Yeah, I get that. And I think given somebody support isn't always about you nurturing them. It's offering support, reasonable adjustments. That's not you nurturing someone. That's being adult to adult. There's a problem. We need to find a solution to it. Rather than it being a nurturing thing. So I think there's something there around the comprehension of how do we ensure that when we are thinking about how we're about to respond or tackle something, that we look at how can I say this in an adult to adult way that doesn't come, because again, you talked about knowing your audience. I also am fiercely independent. I don't like people doing things for us. I can do it myself. My husband does it all the time. It drives me mad, right? There was one time we nearly fell out in the middle of the tip. We'd done a tip run, and I'm carrying the big box, getting a big box out to throw it in the tip, and it's heavy because it's full of paperwork, not paperwork, printed stuff out that was just no good anymore. And he came over and just took the box off me. He didn't even ask us if I needed him to carry it, or he literally took it off us. I was like, what are you doing? I can do that myself. So that's him thinking he's been nurturing and helping us. I'm like, I can do this myself. I'm an adult woman who can carry her own box and put it in the bloody tip.
You're not an adult, you're a rebellious child.
I'm a rebellious child as well. But that was exactly what was happening, wasn't it, Steph? You could see he was thinking he was being nurturing. I'll help her out. That came in a nurturing parent mode, or even controlling parent. That could have even been more controlling rather than nurturing. I'll just do it. So you can see how once you notice this stuff, you'll see it everywhere in your relationships with your children, the way we communicate, and you'll start to see it. But ultimately, what we want to get out of people, we want them to be at work, we want them to be motivated, we want them to be productive, we want them to be accountable for their own actions. If you were coming in as a critical parent, they have no accountability because Nick told us to do it. Nick told us to do it and to do it like this. Not my fault.
100%. If it's got to the Thursday night and they're telling me they're going to be logging off on Friday lunchtime and they haven't yet done it, but they knew the deadline, so that they've already got the deadlines, they know how to deliver. And now I'm having a critical parent to say, actually, you need to change your principles.
And they're adults and they've got self-determination, haven't they? They can make their own decisions around that stuff. Because you're right, they have got all that information. So then people are not accountable, and then there's no trust there as well. So did you do it with the adult to adult mode as well? Did you look at how that would impact motivation, trust, accountability, and productivity?
No.
No. Okay. Just stuck with them too. Laura, come on in. I just saw you going.
I was going to say, I think we just got a bit confused, but we did have some quite good conversations.
Good, sounds like it.
Around like how things worked with like different age groups and things. So, like I was giving the example of my boss being 10 years younger than me, and she's a real critical parent a lot of the time. And it's just interesting because people will step into these roles because they want to, they want that status or whatever. And for me, it doesn't work because I feel patronised and my motivation goes down and productivity and, so I have to constantly phone her and say, well, actually, can we have a conversation about this? And I have to step up into adult rather than reacting in child mode. So we were kind of looking at the ages. We also discussed different sexes being managed by different sexes and how that can change dynamics as well. So we had quite some interesting conversations.
Yeah, good. Well, good. I'm pleased because that's exactly what it's about. But yeah, absolutely. This is what we want to come out of it, having a better understanding of these ego states. And straight away, Laura, you're already recognizing the way that somebody's communicating with you in the workspace and the impact that it's having on you. And then you're having to kind of manage up a little bit and get what you need in a more adult way. Okay, the other team coming in with the child ego states. Who's going to give some feedback?
That'd be me. Yeah, we talked about how motivation would be little to none. If you talk down to, you're just going to switch off. You'd be demotivated. You'd do only as you're told, much a rule, poor attitude. You just switched off, haven't you? And as Laura says, you feel patronised. So, productivity would be slow. You'd be disengaged. There'd be more errors, which it has a cost impact and a brand impacted business. Accountability. We've put sort of work into rule things. I think we all do a little bit more than actually what's in our job spec. But when you're feeling patronised, you're just going to knuckle down and just do what you're told to do. So other things get missed. You may not support others as much. And a little bit on like how clear the message is. If you've got low accountability and you're being interfered with, for want of a better phrase, or you've got no clear boundaries and expectations that you have to achieve, so you don't have that direction to travel. And trust, you're not going to have any. You're going to have that conflict, that irritation. You're not going to want to talk to your manager if they're going to behave like that. You're going to do everything to avoid talking to that manager.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so did you go through the adult to adult state as well?
Yeah, we looked at motivation. You're going to be more engaged because you feel supported. You've got clear boundaries. You've got the help, or you know when to ask for help and direction. Productivity would be consistent or may go up because you'll go above and beyond and help others and have less errors. Accountability, you understand what's expected of you, so you work hard to achieve that because that's your job. That's what you're getting paid to do.
Yeah.
And trust, feels safe asking for help and knows what's expected and when to ask for help.
Yeah. It's it's clear, isn't it, that the gold standard for communicating in the workplace is in that adult to adult mode. This is how we help to improve motivation, productivity, accountability, and trust. And it helps with culture, because if we have those parent-child cultures, it stifles people. People don't feel the psychological safety there. They feel as if they're being told what to do all the time. And unfortunately, that can prevent creativity. It can prevent, what's the word when you create something new?
Entrepreneurial.
Innovation.
Yeah. Sorry, say that again, Alicia.
Innovation.
Innovation, yes, it stifles innovation, entrepreneurial thinking, absolutely. So it stops all of that from happening.
But how do you move someone else? We've got a really rebellious, a critical manager, and he talks to his children, and they're all adults, but they very much can't work with him because he just doesn't listen. It's that way. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
End of. And it doesn't matter how many times I say, go back and ask about, well, can you help me with this? Because I don't quite understand what you want. If they did that, he just comes back at them and say, well, why didn't you know? You know exactly what you're supposed to do, and that's what you're employed to do. And you cannot break that wall down.
Yeah. And this is it, isn't it? It's like, how do we move people from where they are and help them to think a little bit more about how do you understand the way that you are in terms of your management skills? This is why, so TA, we have this in our manager training as like an added optional extra in. And this really helps those managers to recognize, where are you managing and leading from? Because he doesn't know, Steph. That's the thing right now. That manager doesn't know. He doesn't get it. He just thinks that that's the way that he is. But what he's probably doing is replaying how his parents kind of responded to him and communicated with him. And then he doesn't know how to change it or ask things in a different way and show that we can move from that ego state into that adult to adult ego state. So like everything, it's about education. It's about educating people and helping them to see that there is an alternative way of leading and managing and supporting people.
Can only try.
You can, absolutely.
I think
Okay.
it's often quite related to the way people have been managed themselves as well. If you've only ever had an experience of a manager who's a certain way, it's quite hard to see a new way, because I've learned so many management skills from good managers.
Yeah, absolutely. Follow copying other people's behaviors. If those ego states aren't like really entrenched in there as well, like Steph's colleague there, and maybe Steph, your colleague, had never had a really good manager that supported him.
He's got good back. He comes from Nissan, I think, so he's got good background. He's got good technical skills. He just doesn't have any people skills.
Yeah. So I do recommend that you read more about TA if you're interested in it. This does link into well-being, it links into culture, and there is a unit on it. So there is there a unit on it? I'm sure there is. Unit 10, 9 or 10, I think it is. So I'm just looking at timings because it's 4:10 already. We had quite a long discussion on that. The next section is about collaborative tools for wellbeing cultures, but I am going to set you some homework with this one. So some of the tools that we have in our manager training, we've given them to you, is the tools that are essential for helping managers to foster open and effective communication about mental health in the workplace. They're all about starting conversations about mental health. It helps them to develop a support plan, take shared responsibility, being in that adult to adult state, and provide support whilst that individual is empowered to take action. So this is what the tools do. You've seen the mental health check-in tool, But just as a reminder, this is one of the people manager tools. This helps managers to start a conversation about where's your head at, where's your mental health today, and at the end, you've got things like we could complete a stress risk assessment if somebody's in the red, linking that back into your other tools. We're going to look at a stay well at work support plan that might be offered if somebody's struggling with their mental health. If they're in the red, do we have a mental health first aider? Is there a manager who's confident in making sure that person's supported? Do we get that emergency help? And if somebody's at risk of significant harm to themselves or others? So you do have the Stay Well at Work support plan there. You've seen that already, and it's in there. The other tool, which you'll find in today's Padlet, is the Stay Well at Work support plan. This is your homework. Just open and Padlet there. Come on, out of the way. Where am I? I think I'm in the wrong Padlet there. So here it is. Does anyone use anything like a well-being, Mind had well-being action plans, which were very long and very tedious? What's everyone using?
Yeah, so the Mind plan is something that we use if someone has tried to come back to work a couple of times. It hasn't worked. We've done OC health assessments. We've put the adjustments in place, and yet they're still taking time out. It's okay. Well, we'll empower you to look at this plan, come back to us. We'll work with you on this plan to really understand what more we can do for you to engage and support that going forward.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Anyone else using the Mind Wellness Action Plan?
We don't use the Mind one, but I've created my own that actually is not dissimilar to what you've got here. It's not widely used, but it's becoming more widely used, and we're trying to at least plug some of those bits into like one-to-ones and PDRs and things. But and we've also got a team one that we did as well. So it was like looking at things as a team where people feel comfortable sharing and maybe identifying some of those things as a team that you can do to increase wellness.
Okay, great stuff. Okie doke. So the Stay Well at Work support plan is to be used more proactively and preventatively. So it's for anyone to complete, but it tends to work the best if it's a new colleague coming into the business and they have already disclosed that they have a mental health problem. This means that straight away they're coming in, they've got their own Stay Well at Work support plan, they're communicating it with their manager, we're putting in reasonable adjustments, and we're regularly reviewing and talking about this. So the quicker you can tell people about your Stay Well at Work support plan or wellness action plan in inductions, managers making sure that they're constantly asking about Stay Well at Work support plans, offering them as well, is going to be best practice. So there is a little bit of guidance at the front. It is completely for the individual to take ownership of. This isn't a manager tool that you then keep. We recommend that the individual takes responsibility for it. It's their Stay Well at Work support plan. And it can be offered at any point in time, and people can complete this and even not share it with the manager if they don't feel comfortable, but they may want to share it with someone in HR instead. So this is about making sure that they're sharing it with somebody who they feel comfortable to do that. Obviously, we want that to be their manager. I'm not going to go through it, but I've just showed you where it is. It's just got some questions. You can type in here, make sure you save it. You can print it off, fill it in, do whatever you want with it. But I'm gonna ask you to do your own. And then next week, we'll just have a little chat about it when we start the masterclass, because what you'll all experience is you'll all have a different experience of filling this in. And it'll all be dependent on your mental health, your background, whether you're struggling at the moment, what support you need or don't need. So you'll start to see very quickly that, again, it's not a one size fits all for everybody, and everyone will have a different experience of this. So your Stay Well at Work support plan is in Padlet, and it also helps you to think about, from a manager's perspective, what reasonable adjustments need to be put in place, what support do we need to put in place, And then also, what does the individual need to do to support themselves when they're at work? And there could be people, there could be other things that they need to do. And we also mention reasonable adjustments and stress risk assessments in there as well. So it brings everything together, brings work-related stress in, it brings your Equality Act and your reasonable adjustments in, and it makes sure that that support plan isn't just about what we can do to help the individual, it's about what the individual also needs to do to help themselves stay well at work. Come on in, Rachel.
We don't use anything like this. I did speak briefly in one of our meetings about wellbeing passports, which I think is similar to this.
Mm-hmm.
The general consensus was that the managers wouldn't read them, and I think that's because they've had no training, they don't know what they're looking for. But there was also a worry around confidentiality, because obviously these are going to have sensitive information. So I just out to everybody else as well as you, Emily, where would you keep them? Would they be online? Would they, how do people keep these confidential and only accessible to the people that the person completing it wants to give access to?
Yeah. Well, just from my perspective, with our Stay Well at Work support plan, we recommend that the ownership is kept on the individual completing it. Right. So it's up to them to keep their own stuff confidential.
Right.
So therefore they would have access to it and they would decide who to share it with.
Right. Okay. Right.
Anyone else do anything different? No? Alicia?
I would agree. I'd encourage them to share it with their manager, or share it even with bits of it with their team, so their team are able to recognise it, especially if there's somebody who's suffering with ill mental health, as a way of their team being able to really support them. But yeah, it's dictated by what they feel comfortable with.
Anything different from you, Nick? No? Okay.
No, it's exactly down to that. It's empowering that individual to own that detail and share on a regular basis. We do try and get them to set up the meetings with the managers as well, so they've got those regular touch points, as opposed to the manager reaching out to them saying, so what we're meant to be looking at now, it's about them owning their journey back into the normal workday.
Okay, thank you very much. But yeah, if it does get decided to be kept somewhere, then it would need to be kept in a folder that's confidential, that nobody else has access to, and it's locked and stuff like that. So yeah, the usual process around that, Rachel. Okay, good question. Right, I'm going to jump back over to my slides, and we're just going to go through the final bit, which is confidentiality and then best practice, sickness, absence, and return to work. Ultimately, everything that we've covered so far today is all about preventing sickness absence due to mental health problems. Yeah. Masterclass 2, preventing work-related stress, stopping people from going off on the sick. Masterclass 3 today, looking at how managers can be much more supportive and proactive around conversations and fostering cultures of well-being. Just one thing around confidentiality, if anybody does disclose, it must be kept confidential. But people have self-determination. They can make their own choice that they don't want to disclose any of this stuff with the manager. No matter how lovely the manager is and how supportive they are, people will also say, I just don't want to share any of this. And that's absolutely okay. We just continue to offer support. But if somebody does disclose, we would have to breach confidentiality if it was a safeguarding breach only. If it's not a safeguarding breach and we're breaching confidentiality, it can constitute discrimination under the Equality Act. When we are breaching confidentiality, it has to be clear that we're breaching it because a colleague is at risk of significant harm to themselves or others, and you must breach confidentiality on a need-to-know basis only. Who are the people who need to know? Not every man and his dog, just the people who need to know. So this could be emergency services, crisis team. It could be somebody on their emergency contacts. notes. It could be somebody in the workplace, like a designated safeguarding lead. So it has to be on a need-to-know basis only. And if an employee is at risk of significant harm to themselves or others, do you have an escalation process where it's recorded, it's reviewed? Not a question for now, but Unit 8 will ask you all about that. It's going to ask you to make sure that you have all of this in place. Okay. So best practice, sickness, absence, and return to work. So what we know from the research is that the longer that people are off, the harder it is to get them to return to work. This decreases their chances of success exponentially. And then what we find is people are on this long-term sickness absence, and then they never come back to work. So this is why it's really important for managers to have the knowledge, the skills, and the confidence to identify issues early by doing your check-ins, talking about well-being and one-to-ones, recognizing signs and symptoms, using the check-in tool so that they can very quickly recognize that there's a problem, offer the right support, like a stress risk assessment, a stay well at work support plan, EAP, Occy Health, make sure appropriate treatment is put into place, and we're effectively supporting that person. This reduces sickness absence and it avoids unnecessary job loss. But when somebody does go off sick, in the majority of cases, they can come back to work and in the same role as before. This shouldn't be a label that sticks when somebody's gone off with work-related stress or poor mental health or a bereavement or whatever. This does not mean that they can no longer do their job. Just like if you break an arm, you go off, your arm fixes, and you come back to work in the same job. So when somebody is off, best practice is to maintain regular, open, and meaningful communication with people. So what we recommend is that as soon as somebody goes off and they've disclosed that it's to do with stress or poor mental health, we need to be having, or the manager needs to be having a conversation about, okay, that's fine. I need to make sure that you're okay. You've probably got an absence policy around this somewhere as well, so it's definitely worth checking in on that. I need to make sure that you're okay on a weekly basis, if that's all right with you. How do you want me to contact and when? So then again, we're adult to adult, in the moment, problem solving. We're empowering that individual to say, well, you know what? Thursdays are not good. I see my therapist. Can you ring us on a Wednesday? Can you text us before you call so I know it's you? There's no point ringing people at 8:30 on a morning when they're struggling to get out of bed because they haven't slept all night or they've got severe symptoms of depression, and then you make a note saying such and such, I've rang them, they're not answering the calls, they're not answering the calls. When you do have those conversations, you've got to focus on their well-being and recovery. We're not going in for conversations about when are you coming back to work. So we can use the mental health check-in tools for this reason. So say, for example, Laura went off and I said, okay, Laura, you know, you said last week when you were off, you were in the orange. Where are you at today? And Laura's like, I'm still in the orange. I'm really struggling. I haven't managed to get an appointment with my therapist yet. I've just started taking my medication. There's no way on this planet should managers be saying, Laura, well, do you know when you're going to come back to work? It is not the right time. But if Laura said, actually, I'm in the yellow, I've made a little bit of progress. I'm having much more better days than I am having worse days. Therapy's going well. You know, I've spoken to people on the EAP. That's great news. You know, when do you think you're going to be ready to start having a conversation about coming back to work? Completely different time, different conversation. And this is what we want managers to be confident with. So we want them to be mindful about when is the right time to ask about return to work. Make sure that you're making accurate notes. Do your managers make notes already? Do they know that they should be writing down when they're having these welfare check-ins? Laura, what are your managers doing?
So they do. I think they do. The majority of them that I've kind of spoken to, they've got a database that they use. Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
In the majority of cases, we have some poor managers and they're really struggling, but they have training on how to do this.
Okay, good. Good stuff. Okay, so any reasons for sickness absence must be kept confidential unless there's a confidentiality breach, but sickness absence chance like is not going to be one of them moments. One of the things that we can do, though, and I know, Alyssa, you've just kind of alluded to it there, we can ask the colleague if anything they would like sharing with the team. This can really help to create a supportive workplace because, if somebody's happy to say, do you know what, I've just lost somebody really close to us. When I come back, I'm more than happy for people to check in, or to share something. I've just been diagnosed with PMDD. Nobody knows what PMDD is. There's a little education thing on the Mind website that people might want to look at, because when I come back to work, it's going to impact the way that I work, but only if a colleague is happy for those things to be shared. But if they are, it can help to remove stigma, raise awareness and understanding and empathy, and avoid unhelpful situations, especially when somebody does return to work. What we don't want is people kind of tiptoeing around people, making them feel uncomfortable. But if they say no, then nothing gets shared. If somebody is happy, then do make a note of it. Make a note of exactly what you've agreed that you're going to share with the team and how and when it's going to be done. And then finally, we'll hopefully get to the point where we're planning a return to work. Managers should be using all of the skills that we've covered, those listening skills, being non-judgmental. They should know and explain the return to work process and procedure so that everybody's clear on what's happening. At this point, you might have occupational health or even doctor or even psychologists, psychiatrists, recommendations for adjustments as well. This is where you can offer, your manager should be offering phased returns to work, possibly flexible and lighter duties. If somebody's gone off with work-related stress, we would offer them a stress risk assessment, but we must take action on it before they come back to work. What happens if somebody's gone off with work-related stress and then they come back to work and nothing's changed?
They're going to get the stress again. It's all going to repeat.
It's all going to be repeat. And this time, you would have known that was going to happen. So you were potentially, or the manager is then potentially, by not offering a stress risk assessment and taking action before they return to work, putting them back into somewhere where you've got this psychosocial hazards there for them. Offer a stay while at work support plan. You could just get them in for a cup of tea the day before, a week before, just get them back into the environment, seeing people again, just really helping them to gently come back into the workplace. Give them a ring the day before. You're coming back in tomorrow. How are you feeling about it? Is there anything that you need me to do in preparation for you coming in? Is there anything you don't want me to do once you come in for your first day back? And then obviously consider remote workers as well. So their sickness absence, they may not be coming back into the actual workplace. They may be just coming back to a team or a Zooms. And one of the other tools that is in Masterclass 2, which we didn't get a chance to look at, is the home and hybrid stress risk assessment, which you could use here as well. I'll just flash over and show you it so that you actually get to see it. Right, I think I need to go back here. Masterclass 2. Come on, move. Here it is. This is it here. So if you open it up, what you'll see is It's literally exactly the same as the management standards indicator tool that you did, you know, with the 35 questions that you went in and answered that you would use to audit and do your preventative stress risk assessments. So it has all of those questions. The only difference is they've added some additional questions in. So think about your circumstances at home, current working pattern. What proportion of your working time do you currently work from home? When working away from the home environment, what other types of workplaces are a regular part of your current work? And so if they're more kind of remote. And then section B is all about those 35 questions that you saw anyway. But this could be another opportunity to use these questions with some additional ones. It's very long. What you'll see is that this new risk assessment is extremely long. I mean, it's like 9 pages. But do have a little look at it. It is the only one around for home and hybrid work and created by York University, I think it was. So it's there as an additional tool that can now be introduced. Okay, so we have come to the end of the day. So what we've just kind of gone through today is a little bit of a journey around understanding workplace desirability and some of these touch points, all the way from the brand reputation through our recruitment and retention journey, and why well-being is the golden thread that threads all the way through there. What also sat alongside that was the importance of your managers, your people managers, your people leaders, your culture creators. They're the people who, without the knowledge, skills, tools, confidence, and competence to create a culture of well-being, we're going to have lower levels of productivity, lower levels of motivation, lower levels of psychological safety, and we're not going to have people at work functioning well and feeling good. So we covered some tools, some skills, you practice some skills so that you could really see that just by understanding some of these skills and utilizing them, that they were really helping you to get deeper in your relationships, building rapport, and seeing how these skills actually work. We've just gone through the Stay Well at Work support plan, which is your homework to complete your own Stay Well at Work support plan. And we'll start with the next masterclass with you sharing a little bit about your experience on that. You don't have to use our Stay Well at Work support plan in your workplace if you've already got your own, or if you haven't, feel free to adopt it. We do, in our training, we can either use our own Stay Well at Work support plan for you and your managers if you did want some training, or we can adopt yours and embed yours into the training as well. So there's lots of ways that we can make sure that if you do decide to go out for training, that all of your stuff is integrated into it. Just covered some basics around sickness, absence, and return to work best practice when somebody's off with stress and poor mental health. Does anyone have any final questions from today? Anyone have any thoughts and any challenges that you might face in implementing any of this?
It's made me realise that I haven't added another person that I should have been. And that sort of recruitment side of the organisation, I think, is a key contact who I hadn't realised quite how key they might be. So I'm definitely going to take that away and go and set up a meeting. So
you've found a new collaborator?
Yeah, for sure.
So have you got like a Emma version of Emma?
We've got a recruitment team for sure.
Right.
And I know that they look at various things, but I think I need to sort of make more contact with them.
Okay.
We've got quite a big HR team and they're quite spread out. So yeah, I think I need to do some more connecting there.
Okay, excellent, good stuff. Anyone else?
I think we're at the beginning of a journey of writing plans, strategies and stuff. So I think this helps me put some key points in that to start off with. The challenges, there will be the traditional managers, but it's going to be exec-led, so it's tough. We will be the
controlling parent.
Yeah. We will move forward. You're on the bus or you're off the bus. Well, we will consult with the exec team and say this is what we're thinking and see how they take it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Steph. Okay, everyone. So I'm just going to put the evaluation form in the chat box just for you to complete before you disappear. Next masterclass is Masterclass 4, Strategies for Impactful Wellbeing Initiatives. So this is where we start looking at leveraging your peer support initiatives like mental health first aid and champion style roles. We'll be looking at strategic campaign planning. We'll be looking at how to enhance employee engagement in wellbeing initiatives. We'll be looking at demographics, targeting your demographics, and how to build an impactful campaign. So any of your problems that you're experiencing already with your mental health first aiders, wellbeing champions, hopefully we'll get some solutions to them, but do feel free to bring any challenges along with you. And we will tackle them if I don't cover them. And here is the evaluation form. And once just open it into your browser, because once I shut this down, it'll disappear. But it's been good to see you all again today. I will get these part A and part B up, recordings up tomorrow for everybody. And if you need anything else in the meantime, you know where I'm at. Just give us a shout. Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have a thingy tomorrow? I'm just trying to find my diary.
A thingy, a mentoring session. Yes. 9 o'clock.
Traveling to York. Can I?
Chisel.
Bye.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
What do you want to do with it, Steph?
I'm just trying to find my diary. I can do it any time in the day, but 9 o'clock might be a bit tight by the time I've picked up Helen and drove down.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I'm working on creating the new level 3 all day tomorrow, so I'm just doing admin stuff. So anytime, just let us know what works for you and I'll push it back.
You say 1 o'clock?
1 o'clock. Okay, I can do that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
No problem at all. 1 o'clock, Thursday the 2nd. Great. There we go.
Thank you
all
very
done.
much.
No worries. See you soon.
See you later. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.